This is a Rogue Media Network podcast. This is Central Texas Life with Ann Harder.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Central Texas Life, and we're going to talk a little history. We're going to talk about the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame and Museum with the delightful Tiffany Shreiner and Dr. Jody Ginn, who is in development recently, in the last year or so, come to this position. But I want to learn a little bit more about you and your just your passion for things having to do with law enforcement, because the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame is not the ball club. I guess you have to clarify that from time to time.
Absolutely.
But of course, the wonderful Texas Rangers, you know, one riot, one ranger, the whole thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this was the 200th Bicentennial year, 2023, the traditional anniversary of the creation of the Rangers.
So there's lots of, I guess, special things in commemoration of that.
Oh, absolutely. It was a big, busy year. We started out in Fort Worth at the rodeo with the big kickoff events. The whole rodeo was kind of dedicated to the Bicentennial of the Rangers. Every night they did a proclamation and, you know, and all of this. And they had Rangers in the parade, and we had exhibits all over the grounds and did programs and so forth. And yeah, it was a tremendous kickoff. You know, with our friends in Fort Worth. And then we went. The Rangers, the active Rangers, are still organized regionally according to companies, and they're called A through F, Company A through Company F. And Company F is headquartered right here in Waco with the museum.
Right, there, you walk in the door and you see it, yeah.
Exactly. And so we went to every region. The Bicentennial Committee, the Texas Ranger 2023, led by Russell Molina and Lacey Finley, they led and created these events all over the state in each region for each company. And they would have community days, and they would have DPS and Ranger resources out there and engage the public and educate folks and have school groups come in. And we did this all around the state. And I would give talks, and other people would give talks, and Rangers. And we had the final one just a few weeks ago on the 17th and 18th in Austin. We had a daytime event at the Capitol. Senator Birdwell spoke for us there, and then we had our gala that night where we also premiered our new Ranger history film short. It's about a 20-minute film summarizing the history of the Rangers and really emphasizing, though, who they are today, because we have some great things. One of the most recent events is the promotion of Major Wendy Wakeman, who is now the first female in history to command a company. And she's an old friend. I've known her since she was a rookie Ranger.
Oh, my goodness.
And so that was exciting. And really, her promotion came just right in time for us to get it added into the film.
Yeah.
It was very serendipitous.
Yeah. And Tiffany, some of these activities are kind of what brings you in getting some children's programming and things.
Yes,
is that correct?
Yes. Jody and I actually have so many common friends across Texas, but it took until about, I guess, 18 months ago or so, a little over a year ago it feels like, we were first introduced, and I had been working on my children's book, as you know, Legend of the Cosmic Cowgirl, and a lot of the outreach projects around that are you know, Texas-based. I call it Neverland in Texas, Texas-based. And the history of Texas. You know, we implement so many historical themes throughout our book and through our camps and workshops. And, you know, Jody and I got to talking, and the museum needed, the Bicentennial programming specifically needed a little bit more offer for kiddos and families for this commemorative year. And so my team and I hopped on through the Imagineer Arts Academy and helped to facilitate some of those outreach events, really bringing the Texas Ranger history to life for these kiddos through the book and just through a lot of hands-on grit and grace, kindness, courage, and resiliency. Those were our key tenets, and the kids seemed to love it. So we started in Waco when we first started working with you. And then we hopped on. We were in Lubbock with them and Kerrville, and hope to do a lot more in the future.
I was going to say, this is just the start. It's not just for this year's celebration of the Bicentennial.
Oh yeah,
right?
We're looking forward to it. It was such a big hit, and especially with the kids and Tiffany and Cheryl just have such a way with them that engages them. And that's the key. You've got to get them interested in history early on, but you have to reach
Right.
them where they're at, and they really understand how to do that.
Yeah.
And so, we're looking forward to, more programming in the future.
Yeah, and so what is that like? I mean, is it like an afternoon of activities, or do you have speakers, or how do you engage the children in?
They
in
were a
this?
part of our community days,
Uh-huh.
where we were having, the public come in, and we would have those resources from the Rangers, and we would have various sorts of setups of panels, and so they would set their whole thing up in conjunction with the museum, but then they would have these art projects and, photo kind of area and the whole 9 yards. I mean, it was an elaborate setup.
all the fun stuff.
And
yeah.
it was a big hit. I mean, and it really, gets, because, just kind of looking at stuff, only entertains kids for a little bit, but
Right.
they engage the kids, they get them active doing things, and making art, making, ranger related art, that sort of thing. And it was just a huge hit.
For example, Cheryl came up with the idea. Cheryl Russell,
Right,
who
who-
you know,
your
and our
artist,
dear
yes,
friend
right,
that I
right.
work with very closely, the illustrator for my book, and she's the lead visual arts director for pretty much everything we do. They made badges of courage, and so they would.
Yeah, because the Ranger badge, that's a very special display.
pretty
there at the-
iconic.
Yes, it is. It's iconic, of course.
And certainly just. I liken it sort of in a much more for kids anyway, in a much more respectful manner. I had a kid. I had a kid say to me, "Is this kind of like the bat signal?" When he looked at the Texas, he looked at the Texas
You could have
Ranger
a
badge.
gobo light.
And I said, it kind of
right.
is. It's kind of like, I said, they're coming in to get the bad guys, that's for sure.
That's
and
true.
so, but when we worked on the badges with them, prior to the bat signal comment, we would ask them, what are some things that help you feel brave? Things you've already been through, or ideas
Right.
that remind you of courage and bravery. And so they would write these ideas and draw these into their badge, and that would be on the back side. So anytime they wanted to look at their badge, they could be reminded of ways in which they could be inspired to be brave when it was really hard. And of course, bullying and things like that came up because of the age demographic
Right.
that we work with and alongside. And I just can't tell you how inspiring it is to see these kids' imaginations come to life through these activities, and then see them become more curious about Texas history, Texas Ranger history, and then to also be amongst real life today current Texas Rangers, and you could see it became more just palpable for them to potentially become a Texas Ranger, or just to have that in their sphere of heroic influence.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was wonderful.
Well, you mentioned iconic. Of course, the great state of Texas has got such a storied history, and it's great to get kids plugged into that. Let's talk a little bit about you, though, Jody. I mean, you grew up in Houston and went to the Army, and what kind of got you interested in law enforcement? How did that kind of become?
Well, after my stint in the regular Army, I was in the Army Reserves, and I was tapped to go on a active duty joint task force mission with the Border Patrol.
Oh, the
and
Border
I worked
Patrol.
with them for about a month, like that, and that's what introduced me. Even though I had family legacy in law enforcement, but it was all a generation or more past, and I didn't know a lot of these
You didn't
folks.
grow up
I didn't
around
grow up
a
around it
cop
whole-
putting on the clock and going out.
Yes.
And, right.
and so this was my first-hand introduction to it, and it just really clicked.
Yeah.
And I ended up going to the regional academy in Austin, and then first going to work up for a small town in Burnett County. But then I went back to the Houston area, went back to school, got a criminal justice degree, continued to do what they call reserve law enforcement on the side while I got my degree, and came back to the Central Texas to San Marcos to finish a bachelor's in criminal justice, and went to work for Hays County and was there for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And first with the constable's office and eventually with the district attorney as an investigator and then chief investigator. But during that time is when I met my first Texas Ranger, and that kind of set me on this track.
Yeah. So you never became a member of the Texas Rangers?
Oh, no, I was never a Ranger. I was never part of DPS. You have to be part
Right,
of
it's a-
DPS for a period
right.
of time before you can apply to be a Ranger. and so I worked for mainly local agencies and that sort of thing. But I worked with, especially once I got to the DA's office, I worked with the Texas Rangers, quite a bit, and took training from them and that sort of thing. But the connection was personal. My great grandmother had told me stories of her baby brother who had been a ranger in East Texas and had cleaned up a town and was given a set of engraved pistols. And by the time I was in my mid-20s and met my first living active Texas Ranger, a gentleman named Tommy Ratliff, that's about all I remembered. And so I asked him, I said, I've got this family story of a Ranger ancestor, and in Texas, that's kind of like, having royalty line, you never know whether it's really true or not.
Yeah,
and,
anecdotally, we talk about
we all got,
my grandmother
my
always talked about.
sister was a princess or a,
Right.
whatever. And so it's like, how do I find out,
Yeah.
if that's true? And he got me started on doing research at the state archives and at the museum's archives here in Waco. And it turned out that my ancestor was not only Ranger, but he was Ranger at a very significant time and involved in what turned out to be some very historically significant events, and which became the subject of my dissertation and then book.
Yeah. I want to talk about your book too. This is the East Texas Troubles.
Texas Troubles.
Yeah, the All Red Rangers Cleanup of St. Augustine.
That's right. And then that title comes from the way the people talked about the events preceding the All Red Rangers. They refer to as the Troubles. Even today, you ask folks that know that history.
Yeah,
in
this
that
was back in the
community.
30s.
This was back in the 30s, and some of it even started in the 20s. And when I started my research in about 2000, there were a lot of folks still alive that had been even young adults during that time, and were eyewitnesses to many of the key events.
And it was a series of murders, right?
Well, it was basically the whole takeover of the community by a criminal gang.
What?
And they, but they built their power on the local black community, where during Jim Crow, typically did not have access to the courts, and so they would run all kinds of scams and extortion and robbery and things like that on local black citizens who had no one to turn to, and then once it that emboldened them, and so by the time that the local white community kind of took notice and started to push back, well, these guys were just so brazen, and so they murdered people right on the courthouse square in front in broad daylight. I mean, it's like very, prototypical Old West, mythology. I mean, shootouts on the town square.
Six-shooter junction was what they call Waco,
Right.
That was the day.
And so they, but the turning point was when a young progressive governor called James V. Allred out of Wichita Falls. He had been a DA up there. Then he had been the youngest attorney general elected in Texas, and then he became the youngest governor elected in Texas. And he was elected on a platform of law enforcement reform, because the Rangers especially were being politicized in the decades leading up to all of this, so that depending on who the governor was really dictated the quality of the Rangers in service, and to the fact that many of the qualified and respected Rangers would quit, and or they would get fired, and like in the end by Ma Ferguson, who was basically the a stand-in for her husband who had been impeached, Jim Ferguson.
Correct.
She, fired all but 2 of the Rangers when she came into office that hadn't quit already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was when Frank Hamer left the Rangers for the last
Right.
time, and that's why they had to reach out to him, to go after Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah.
'Cause he
Interesting. Fascinating history. Yeah. The Texas Ranger Hall of Fame and Museum, that was one of my favorite gems in Waco. And Waco has got some fabulous museums,
Absolutely.
I have to say. And, and of course with the additional tourism, what Chip and Joanna have brought in, I'm sure it has helped get a lot of
absolutely.
traffic in the door. But there are just some amazing exhibits. If you've not been to the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame and Museum lately, you need to go. You need to go check it out, because you're always, adding things, I'm sure.
Sure. Now, I'm not involved in that aspect of
Right.
the existing museum. I'm designing and developing a brand new facility that will come in and kind of bring us up to date, and it will expand in scope. It will not just be the Rangers, but it will be when you hit 1935, which is the events in St. Augustine, all that. Governor Allred and the 44th Legislature, they're the ones who created the Department of Public Safety in 1935, and so this museum will now then expand to tell that story at that point in time. So it starts with the Rangers for the first 100+ years.
Correct.
And then it runs into a story about all of DPS. So it'll really be a modern, not just a history museum, but a modern law enforcement museum that teaches the kids and the public about who the Rangers are today, who DPS are, what they do, how they do it, why they do it. So we'll really expand beyond just history programming into STEM and STEAM programming.
Oh, yeah. Now, so how is all that going to be sort of brought into play?
Well, I mean, we're very early stages. So
yeah,
there's really
so
no
kind of planning things.
But,
yeah.
but we're going to be, first of all, it'll all will actually tell a story. You know, the current museum is focused on showcasing the incredible artifact collection. And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
fantastic.
There are some amazing things there.
This new facility will be more selective in artifacts because what it will do is it will be built on a linear chronological narrative. It'll tell a story of the Rangers and then DPS from the beginning until the present day, and it will use a combination of text and images and technology and artifacts
I'm sure video,
to tell
all
that
kinds
story.
of things to
Absolutely.
do. And is this is an extension of the building there, the facility?
It'll be
where it
a
is?
new building, a brand modern building, and at a brand new location.
Oh, in a new location.
Yep.
Because I know there's been some issue with
Yes,
the grounds
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
that is a key factor in it
Yeah.
needing to go to a new location. But,
right.
but
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, can you tell me anything more? Is all still kind of
Well, it's you know, that was in 2008. They discovered that that what they had thought had been that the facility had been built on a cemetery that had been moved. Turns out graves had not have been moved,
Right.
and when they were building a new
and it became a very big
very
issue.
big, and so and I was actually very aware of it back then through a personal connection, and so basically the summation of that is that the city entered, nobody knew at the time.
No.
And so once this occurred and a lot of money had been spent, taxpayer dollars, all that, but so the city entered into an agreement with the Texas Historical Commission and National Park Service and other entities to basically finish what they had started then, which was a new facility for Company F Texas Rangers, but then that would be it,
Right.
and so forth. And fast forward to today, the museum facility is dated and deteriorating, and even the Rangers are facing challenges, flooding and security and parking and things that just can't be addressed. And so
So the whole thing is
the
gonna
whole
move.
thing will move, including Company of Texas Rangers. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Should
But-
we tell her about the Pettcoat Rangers?
Oh yeah, you had
Well,
mentioned
sure.
that to me.
I have to say, he had me at Texas Rangers because of our common family history.
Obviously,
and,
yeah.
Captain Charles Shreiner and whatnot. But he, when he said Pettcoat Rangers and you might be working with kids, I said, count me in.
Count me
what are we
in.
doing?
Yeah, how are we going to get this
Yeah.
accomplished?
well, the first official female Rangers didn't come into service until the 1990s. But starting in the 1930s, there were women that worked with the Rangers, and that's why they may have even been called at the time. Pardon me.
Yeah, listen, I'm suffering from the same
The
thing.
allergies, I know. Well,
do
that's what I
not
was
worry.
saying when we first walked in. I said,
Yeah.
I need to open up these allergies for sure.
And so and one of the most notable was you're probably familiar with the two highway patrolmen that were murdered by Bonnie and Clyde up by
Correct.
Grapevine. So, one of them had a wife, Trooper Wheeler, and his wife went to work for DPS. The following year, DPS was created the following year, and she went to work there. Now, officially she was a secretary, but they were dealing with challenges with trying to shut down illegal gambling halls. And, when these Rangers walked in there by themselves, they kind of, even if they didn't wear their Ranger garb, they just kind of stood out. They just, and so these places would hide everything. And so what they decided to do is to go undercover as a couple.
Yeah.
And so she and some other ladies went undercover, that were employees of DPS, went undercover with these rangers posing as their wives in order to get them access to these illegal casinos, so and they could gather the evidence to prove that that's what in fact they were, and then get them shut down.
Yeah.
Smart cookies.
Sounds like another
and
book.
that's kind of where the whole Pettcoat Ranger thing started. But I mean, really, you might want to get. And gosh, I feel terrible now. I was just visiting with her a minute ago over at the museum. But there's a lady that's doing all that research, and we need to put y'all together and
Bring her
you
in.
can do a whole show on this.
Yeah.
Pettcoat Rangers.
Pettcoat Rangers
That would be
and
awesome.
female Rangers. And we do have an exhibit on the current female Rangers right now, which is really significant. In fact, just this summer, our local major, or actually this fall, just a couple months ago, Wendy Wakeman was promoted to major and is the first female in history to command a Ranger company.
Right.
And that's right here in Waco.
And so she is here,
She is,
Company F.
Right. She's the major for Company F now.
Excellent.
And that happened just in time. As a part of the Bicentennial, we produced a short film, about 20 minutes, on the history of the Rangers, all the way up to the present. It is narrated in part by Christine Nix, who was the first African-American female Ranger. And it, just in time, the promotion happened just in time, so we have that. That's kind of right up to date, with the promotion of Major Wakeman. And it's a great film, and we're going to be kind of doing screenings of it around the state, here this coming year.
So, but you can see it now at the
No,
the museum?
Not yet. Not yet. But it will. Hopefully, eventually, it'll play in.
It'll be part of your auditorium is fabulous there. So, do you have a location, an idea where the whole new facility will be located, or not?
Nothing set in stone yet.
Okay.
So, yeah, we're looking at a number of places, but it will be in the downtown vicinity.
It will be in Waco. It's not moving out of Waco.
No, it'll be in. I mean, specifically in the downtown vicinity. It's
Good.
right here in the heart of the tourism district.
I keep pushing him for a timeline, Ann. I'm like, so are we talking 6 months, a year, 18 months? What are we talking? Because I'm real excited.
Just too early to tell yet, but it's one of those projects. Is when all the pieces are put together, it's gonna happen fast.
And the
at that
funding,
point.
I guess, is through the state, correct? Or how is
That's what we're working on, a combination. The museum is owned and operated by the city, always has been.
Right.
And so it is at its core, it's a city project. And the city is obviously, making a substantial commitment to it. But beyond that, we're working on the rest. It's early stages.
Oh, it's just going to be amazing. Well, we've talked about your background in law enforcement. What kind of got you into the history, though? I mean, it was researching your family, I guess.
It was, which I started simply as a personal project, and a family project, and document this so we could say,
yes,
for real,
this did happen.
We really do have this Ranger ancestor. It's not just a folktale family myth. And there are myths in my family. My late uncle was convinced. He said that his uncle, who was the younger brother of our Ranger ancestor, had told him that this younger brother, who was not in law enforcement, had been asked by Frank Hamer to go on the Bonnie and Clyde hunt.
Oh.
Well, that's something I've researched in quite depth. I knew Frank Hamer Jr. I don't know if my uncle actually, would have been my granduncle told my uncle that for real or not, but my uncle believed it. I tried to have a conversation with him.
He's like, no.
I was like, okay.
I'm taking this one with me.
Yeah, but no, it didn't. That so like I said, we've all got family myths, but then we've got true history too, and it's just sorting that out.
Right.
When it's been passed down, when the details have kind of gotten lost through time, and so I went.
The retelling of things can change.
Absolutely. And so I was, trying to dig that all out. I wasn't just because, my great grandmother said it doesn't make it true. So I needed to prove it.
Right.
And that's how it started. But in doing so, I started making all these contacts in the history world, not the least of which was a gentleman named Al Lohman, who has since passed, and he was just a giant in Texas history, knew everybody. That's the reason I know all the people I know. I either got introduced to them directly by Al Lohman, or somebody that Al Lohman introduced me to the next one.
Right.
And so I owe a great debt to him, and then other mentors like Robert M. Utley, who was the Dean of Western History, he's the one that started, revising the, some of the Anglo myths, starting with Little Bighorn back in the 50s. And he went on to be the chief historian and assistant director of the National Park Service under Jimmy Carter. And he wrote the modern general history of the Texas Rangers. He started his work in the 90s. They came out 2001 and then 2007. Those were Oxford University Press, Lone Star Justice and Lone Star Lawman. And then James L. Haley, who is just, is a multi-award-winning, Texas author, biographer of Sam Houston, author of Passionate Nation, many other things. And these folks, they just kind of took me under their wing and, in various ways provided what they had to offer and guidance on all aspects of it. And, next thing you know, I just, decided to, go back to grad school and then it took off from there.
Yeah. So now you have your PhD. And any other books, any other things that you're researching and working on?
So, in addition to my first monograph, that's East Texas Troubles, I previously published, on behalf of the Texas Historical Commission, co-authored a book on the Palmetto Ranch battlefield, which was the site of the last battle of the Civil War. But then our research, and it was co-authored with a gentleman named William McWhorter, who was then the military sites coordinator for THC. And we discovered that it was also the site of an earlier and much larger battle, which was the only battle in the Civil War where foreign troops engaged in partisan combat on U.S. soil. And that was Juan Cortina's men actually crossed and fought with Union troops against the Confederate troops under John Ford, who was also a famous Ranger commander. And it was mostly a cavalry battle, or they were cavalry, Ford's men, and so that some very historic significance to that, and so that was the Palmetto Ranch battlefield. Prior to that, I had published chapters in anthologies. One was Texas Rangers in Myth and Memory, in an anthology called Texan Identities, edited by Dr. Light Cummins and Dr. Mary Shear. And then I had a chapter in a anthology called Single Star of the West on the Republic. That's about Indians during the Republic, and it's mine is a case study about Indians who collaborated and with the Republic, because there were Indian Rangers during this period and things like that. And so, but this was focused on this gentleman John Connor, who was a Delaware chief, and he is the only person of Indian descent to have received a land grant in Texas.
Wow.
And he did that because he was Houston's emissary to the Comanches and other tribes after Lamar tried to run them all out. And then Houston came back into office and tried to make the peace with them, and John Connor led that effort.
Oh, my goodness. You are just a wealth of historical information. So, you serving as an adjunct professor still? Not doing that anymore?
Haven't been doing that in a few years. I was at Austin Community College for a few years, but no, other things have, makes it difficult to do that. I am hoping to maybe, teach some classes in the future. But
you would be awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah,
and the more I get to know Jody, the more I realize how devoted he is to our youth.
Yeah.
And how devoted he is to, I may get this phrasing wrong, but how devoted you are to making sure that the entirety of the Texas Ranger history is honored. Not just one particular group, all of those who have served,
right? Obviously,
and their families,
right?
Past, present, and future. And you know me, Ann. You say something to do with youth, and here I come running. I can't help myself.
Right.
And especially when it's so steeped in Texas history and just this idea of kindness, courage, and resiliency.
The Bicentennial folks were good about that during all these celebrations, to always acknowledge the wives and the families. They make a lot of sacrifices.
They do. I mean, every day when they get ready to go to work, they don't know if they're coming back.
They don't know if they're coming back. They miss a lot of family events and holidays and things of that nature. And so that story, that will again be a part of this new museum. We will talk about the sacrifices the families make as well.
I I named my son after a Texas Ranger, Captain Jack Hayes.
Yeah.
He's Charles Hayes Shreiner, my son.
Yeah.
He knows he's 11 now. He should know more than he knows, but I'm going to count on Jody to educate
I was going to
him.
say, might have to have a Coke with him and discuss some stuff.
He's a little bit too
That's
into basketball
awesome.
right now to listen about all
But
this stuff.
still, I
Yeah.
mean, to anything
just
that's
so-
going to get kids involved
That's
and
right.
energized and excited about our collective history.
Sure, and carry
you
the
know?
torch forward.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I said, tell other stories. You were asking if I had anything in the works, and one of the key things I have is I'm working on a manuscript that's focused on the victims of Bonnie and Clyde. You know, there's been
Interesting.
tons of stuff that focus on Bonnie
On
and Clyde.
them, yeah.
Mythologize them,
Sure.
romanticize them, that sort of thing. And then, you know, there's been some good stuff done. There's, you know, a really great biography on Frank Hamer. And then there's been the film The Highwaymen
Sure.
that you know, tells the story of the pursuit and ambush from Frank Hamer's perspective and that sort of thing, the law enforcement perspective. But there just hasn't been a lot of emphasis on the victims, and the victims aren't just the people who were murdered, but their families.
Sure.
Like I mentioned, Trooper Wheeler's wife, and then the other trooper who was murdered, Murphy. He had he was engaged, and his fiance ended up wearing her wedding dress to his funeral.
Oh.
And there's stories like that, and so and I know the descendants, and it was some personal stories like that in St. Augustine. The families, I came to know some of the families who suffered multi-generational trauma because of the murders in St. Augustine, and that's what. And I try to bring that out in that story where I was able to do so. And that's what got me started on this, looking at, we need to talk about these families. They suffered multi-generational trauma in the height of the Great Depression,
Yeah.
where families are already struggling to
Stressed.
survive, and then the breadwinners are murdered, and so
Yeah.
and the folks, and if you look out there, it's out there that people, but it all gets overshadowed, by the Hollywood versions. The
Right, and the,
1967 film.
the-
Just totally romanticized. It's completely fictionalized, except for a few names.
Yeah.
And but that's what people take away. That's what people remember, and so
Right.
they don't they don't think about the victims.
No.
And because they're not talked about. But and so that's kind of one of my lead projects.
Oh, that's awesome. Look forward to hearing more from you. And of course, Tiffany's always a delight for us to get together and visit and hear about this great collaboration between the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame and Museum and Tiffany and her Imagineer Arts Academy and all the great things that you've got going on with kids. I'm just looking forward to many more wonderful opportunities to sit down with you and hear about things that are happening.
We have a few other things up our sleeve that we're talking about too, in the Hill Country as well. So
Oh, yeah,
once
right.
that comes-
Expanding.
But yeah, just Texas youth in general, and Texas
Right.
history and youth, and so I'm excited to see what that might bring as well.
Yeah,
We'll come
yeah.
back if that comes to fruition. We'll come back for sure.
Absolutely.
And keep in mind that the Bicentennial of Texas is only 12 years away now.
It's coming
Or
right up.
Yeah, 12 years away now that
Yeah.
when we hit 24. So that's what a lot of this stuff is going to prepare to lead the educational process, through the Bicentennial of Texas.
Right, and to have all that framework in place would be just awesome.
Yep.
Thank you both. Thank you, Dr. Jody Ginn.
Thanks,
Thank you for being here with us, and Tiffany, and thank you for joining us for Central Texas Life. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Central Texas Life with Ann Harder is part of the Rogue Media family. Be sure to check out our other shows at roguemedianetwork.com. Please rate this show 5 stars on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Join us again soon for more Central Texas Life with Ann Harder. This has been a Rogue Media Network production.